Anyway, with that, I'm going to introduce our guests. First of all, how many of you have been in Nashville before 2016, 2017? Then I don't need to tell you any more than we have bookman and bookwoman of Hillsborough Village here today.
Hi, I'm Saralee Woods, and my partner in life, and at one time in the bookstore is Larry Woods, and he will talk for himself if you have any questions. So I want to do a couple of things. I want to make a few remarks, and then I want to open it up for discussion. And like I said, anything legal or about the Metro Charter, Larry's here to answer all. And political. What was the Hopewell Box about? A friend of mine told me yesterday she had read the book, but she didn't grow up here. She didn't know these communities or these names. The Hopewell Box was the ballot box of the number of votes cast by voters in Hopewell in 1945 in what was a special election for Davidson County. Now, how it became a special election, there's a lot of background given in this book. The usual amount of votes in the Hopewell Box was 100 votes for an election. During this special election, the deciding outcome of that election was decided by the Hopewell Box, and the number of votes reported, 304. The years covered in this box started around 1929 when James Squires, the author, talks about his grandfather. And his grandfather was very beloved and actually lived in a Hopewell Box. And it ended in about, Squires ends this book in about 1994. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and how I saw this book when I read it when it was first published. We were already married, and Larry had known Squires for many years. And so I'd heard about a lot of this stuff because I grew up in a political family, but reading it in black and white, I was like, Shazam. So I grew up in Oneida, Tennessee. It's located in Scott County. That's why I sound this way. The Terrys have lived there for hundreds of years. My dad was George Alvin Terry, graduated from the University of Tennessee, where he met my mother. Go Vols. When I met my husband, I did not know that it would lead to a long friendship with Jim Squires, and that the stuff mentioned in this book would reintroduce me to my own family's political history. My mother grew up in Englewood, just a few miles from the Hopewell Box, and attended Jerry Baxter School and graduated from Isaac Litton. Anyone recognize those names? She would have told you that is not East Nashville, that is Englewood. When she met Larry, she told him she was very sorry, and she felt sorry for him that he had to graduate from Donaldson High School and not Litton. Her family home was located on Birchwood Avenue in Englewood, which was right around the corner from Phillips Robinson Funeral Home on Gallatin Road. My mother said when they walked home from the Trinity Lane Church of Christ, where they went 2 to 3 times a week, they stopped at the Philip Robinson Funeral Home to pay their respects of the family who died, whether they knew them or not. Her home backed up to Sarah Dozer's home, and Sarah Dozer eventually marries Rob Robinson, who's mentioned in this book and was in the legislature. So my mother and Sarah Robinson and the Robinsons remained close all of their lives. When Daddy took his bride to Oneida, he told her they would move to Nashville someday. Meanwhile, my dad, who was an East Tennessee Lincoln Republican, back when those things really existed, got involved in politics like his grandfather. Scott County was the home of Senator Howard Baker and his father, Congressman Howard Baker, who lived in Huntsville. Congressman Baker was my dad's political mentor, and Senator Baker and my dad remained lifelong friends. In the late 50s, my dad was elected to the Tennessee House of Representatives, that's the state legislature, and later to the Senate. He was in the minority. Democrats were his friends. They were roommates when they shared a hotel suite. And they worked together on improving education. We spent a lot of time during those years at my grandmother Wynn's house, where I heard a lot about Davidson County politics. My dad grew up in a wonderful family of merchants and very stable, predictable people who had their own business. They had a Chevrolet dealership and a Ben Franklin store and a Western Auto, and were involved in their community. When he met my mother and his family, asked what my mother's family was like. It was smart, educated, but they were musical and a lot of fun, which was not something they used to describe the Terrys. My dad said if you read about it in a book, if you saw it on television or in a movie, you wouldn't believe this family. So it was interesting. He and his siblings married fun people. So Winfield Dunn is eventually elected governor, and he hired my dad to be a director of surplus property. So Daddy went all over the state dealing with surplus property. When we moved, Mother was very grateful to be across the river in Goodlettsville, and Daddy always advised us about Republicans not being elected at that time and who to vote for that were his Democrat friends. And you had better believe we always voted, and still do, for any Robinson that's on the ticket. So in my home, we discussed Nashville and state politics regularly, and we subscribed to both the Tennessean and the Banner. I worked in state government when Lamar Alexander was governor, and then I wanted to work in a statewide campaign, and I worked for a man named Winfield Dunn when he ran against a man who became his very good friend, Ned Ray McWhorter. So I got, as an assistant, I got a real good up close and personal look again at politics, where I said, thank you very much. Done. A few years later, I was introduced to Larry Woods on a blind date, and we've been happily married almost 34 years. Many of you in this room, Sandra Roberts, have known Larry longer than I have, or Drusilla's known him longer. And they know he is a yellow dog Democrat, to put it conservatively and mildly. My dad and Larry loved each other. We could put them on family trips in their own car, and they could talk history and politics for hours. Turns out they agreed on about 90% of the issues in America. Imagine that. So I came, when I read this book again over the weekend, it's so different, if you read a classic years later, what you see. A little bit about the book. Secrets of the Hopewell Box was published in 1996. The talk was that Squires waited for some people to die before he wrote this. We had just opened our bookstore in what was the first original Pancake Pantry. You all know later we moved across the street. Thank you to Sandra Shelton and people like her store. We expanded Bookman Bookwoman. Squires, who was a close friend of my deceased brother-in-law, Frank Woods, and his wife, Jane Ann Woods. And so I got to know him through them and love his book. In 96, some of you may have been there, Michael Sheridan, who's related to someone mentioned in this book, Frank and Jane Ann hosted a luncheon at the Cumberland Club, and a lot of the people mentioned and their families were alive and came to that event. My niece Saralee Woods did the research for this book, and Squires names a list of the people he interviewed on page 300. So there were a lot of tall tales told at this book, and somewhere we have a copy with people that were living at the time with their signatures on it. If you've been to our house, you know what it's like to find. Larry has a special way of filing his books, hiding his collection. I just reread Secrets of the Hopewell Box, and the late wonderful man John Siegenthaler said it best. It's on the back of the dust jacket. For hundreds of journalists who worked with him and for him, this book is vintage Squires. In his days as his reporter, he always had the gift to make fact more interesting and provocative than fiction. He still has that gift. And U.S. Senator Fred Thompson said, Jim Squires told a uniquely hilarious yet moving story of the rough and tumble world of politics a generation ago, and his accounting of personal trials, tribulations, and exploits of the players is totally engaging. It sure looks like politics used to be a lot more fun. So Squires had a way of reaching across the aisle. So I'm going to point out a couple of things that we have that I found second time around really summarizing and nailing the book for me. On page 8 and 9, Squires said, "This is the story of my grandfather's friends. It's more than the story of a classic machine that demanded tribute, stole elections, and engaged in practices." And he goes on to say, it's the saga of the urban revolution in America. It's a case study of the power of the three most irrepressible forces in politics: class struggle, racism, and personal friendship. And a 40-year journey down the potholed road of change in American life with one of the damnedest crowds that ever traveled it. The language in this book is not for the faint-hearted because it's in quotations, but Squires is very literal about what he remembers his grandfather especially saying. He states on page 101 that fixers, people that fix, I don't want to say elections, but could fix problems, were the people that helped people. They were, in the sheriff's office, he said, ambassadors. They had not only enforced some of the laws, but they'd been hired to keep criminals and keep order, but they also reached out to do the good work of politics, which meant helping people. That's why free food and beer was usually in the sheriff's office to put in patrol cars so it could be distributed to people hungry and destitute. But, you know, when you're hungry, maybe thirsty, you remember who helps you. And Sheriff Robertson, when there were elections going on all through this book, they would back one candidate, the next election. Michael Sheridan's father, where's Michael? You're here somewhere. There you are. Michael Sheridan's grandfather would say, we're changing sides because this is what's going to be better for people or themselves. He always said, Garner Robinson always said, make your stops, call your friends, have your wives call their friends. You know how to do it. So that was before the internet and email and being inundated, you know, with politics. We still get postcards. Larry still gets calls from people, especially in judicial elections. How do I vote? Both sides of our family. So personal communication mattered to these people, which in some way it still does. Also, Squires reiterates over and over and over again political machines that allow political machines allow no dissent, and they're still around. If you keep up with the current events, deals are made in the back room, and not all of the press is welcome to attend. Squires also starts on some very moving things that happened in Nashville and to him personally during the civil rights movement, and why Nashville was at the forefront of a lot of these issues. And he said, for the first time, I realized it is what you don't know that is also and often more important key to true understanding rather than thinking you know things. In this book, family and friendship were very important to Squires. There's a story on page 269 and 70 that in 1965, Squires was asked by an editor who did not know the history of Jim Squires' family, was asked to go into a meeting and report on it where some things were going to happen. This meeting involved close political friends of Squires and his family. And Squires said, once I go behind that door with them, I'm not a reporter anymore. So he was very loyal and did not turn on these people. But as Larry says, he did write the sequel called West End that is a novel, but I believe Larry's been told it's based on true stories. Politics is a beautiful thing is a phrase that was attributed to my father's best political friend, the late Senator Annabelle Clement O'Brien. When my parents died, they were buried at Spring Hill. Daddy first, and Mother insisted that Philip Robinson Funeral Home on Gallatin Road handle all the arrangements, and it was wonderful. They transferred his body to the Goodlettsville Church of Christ, where he was honored for his military service. There was a flag on the hearse where people pulled off the road and put their hands on their heart from Goodlettsville going to Spring Hill Cemetery. Squires tells the truth about Nashville politics, my opinion, including the offensive language, very offensive language, used by his family and the shameful way black people were treated. One of my last discussions with him was at the Pancake Pantry, and he said his major regret was that our nation seemed to have gone backwards in the fight for racial equality. So, I want to turn this over to discussion because that's what this book is about. Are any of you all mentioned in this book? I know some people named Woods are, but their first name's not Larry, but they're mentioned in here. Any of you have relatives mentioned in this book? Jake Sheridan appears a lot. So, what do you all want to talk about? Larry, I know you got things to say. What have I missed?
Well, Jake Sheridan's not just mentioned a lot.
Come to the microphone.
You've all heard about the people behind the scenes that run the political campaigns and determine the politics. Well, from the 1940s up through the 70s at least, the two key people, well, the three key people in Nashville were H.E. Flippin and Elkin Garfinkel and Jake Sheridan. He wasn't just mentioned a lot. He controlled politics in Nashville if his team of candidates won. And if they didn't, he tried again, and if it still didn't work, he switched sides, back to a different set of candidates, right? These were the people that controlled the money. These were the people that the developers, the people that wanted to change the direction of Nashville, knew to go to and break bread with and have a little liquor with, and here's $20,000, take it to one of your candidates and give it to them.
Clark Hardware?
Yes, H.E. Flippin is Clark Hardware. Yeah, Bob Buchanan knows what's going on here. Everybody knew if you wanted a job with Beverly Briley, mayor of Nashville 3 terms, if you wanted a job at Metro with the mayor, et cetera, you had to have a note from H.E. Flippin. If you didn't have it, you were wasting your time. You might get an interview, but no, you're wasting your time if H.E. Flippin had not said, hire this guy, do what he wants.
Didn't you see this up close and personal when you and Nancy lived in Chicago?
So I married Clifford Allen's daughter. In the 50s and 60s, the 3 or 4 people who were always running for countywide offices and usually winning one of them were Beverly Briley and Ben West and Clifford Allen. They were swapping offices back and forth. I'm sure you've all heard the story about Richard Fulton's brother, who won the state senate election but was too young to serve, and they refused to seat him. So they had a special election that Richard Fulton, the younger brother, ran and won, and of course Fulton's then going to be congressman and mayor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was Clifford Allen's Senate seat. He was in bad health and chose not to run, so when they didn't seat Richard Fulton's older brother, the state senate voted to put Clifford back in office. No election, nothing. Just come on back. We'll make you the senator for the next 2 years.
And my father told us when he ran for Congress, we were voting for Clifford Allen because he was in the legislature with him. So
It was all a question of who you knew. It wasn't Democrat in Nashville. It wasn't Democrats versus Republicans because the Republicans were never going to win, basically. It was who you knew and who you were close to and who you were related to, and it was whether you went to the meetings at the Tennessean office of John Sigenthaler or whether you went to the meetings out at the Phillips Robinson Funeral Home on Galton Road. Those were the 2 warring political camps in Nashville. And again, the lines weren't straight and narrow. You could move from one camp to the other for particular elections, and frequently that happened. But everybody on the inside knew, call Miss Gardner, John Sigenthal's secretary, find out when they're meeting down there in Sigenthal's office tonight, and we'll all go down. Later on, it was where the Hermitage Hotel restaurant down.
Hill Grill.
Yes, where a lot of the Sigenthaler meetings took place about politics. Yeah, if you were interested in politics, whether you wanted something from the city council or the mayor or whoever, or whether you wanted to run for office, you needed to get invited to one of those 2 places. If you didn't, your chances of winning an election were pretty darn close to 0.
And if you were in Chicago, and your
So
wife needed a
I
job.
married Clifford Allen's daughter. I'm in law school at Northwestern, downtown Chicago, and I'm starting my 2nd year. We get married in August, move up here in September. I got a job making $20 a week. She's a school teacher in Nashville. We thought, well, she won't even trouble getting a school teaching job. They're always desperate for teachers in the city of Chicago. She applies every day. Doesn't hear back from anybody. 2, 3 weeks later, we're sitting there across the kitchen table wondering, how we're going to keep putting food on the table. She starts applying for other jobs in the city of Chicago and Cook County. Doesn't hear back from anybody. I go talk to the one friend I've got on the faculty, and I say, anybody that's hiring? What can we do here? And he looked at me and said, what does the local ward boss say about our application? I said, ward boss? What's that? I mean, they didn't call him that here in Nashville, but he explained. I said, oh, yeah, I know those kind of people, but not in Chicago. He said, well, you've got one in your class, a guy named so-and-so. He's in your class. His dad is the biggest Republican ward boss in Chicago. And I knew enough to know that doesn't sound promising. Dick Daley controls this city. The Republicans don't get jobs. He said, no, but they do in the county. Oh, yeah, go talk to your classmate. I went and talked to my classmate for about 2 minutes. He said, I'll take care of it. Next day, she got a call and was hired over the phone. There was no pretense about it. You knew the right people to call. We're hiring her. What grade do you want to teach? Whereabouts in the city?
Who was your classmate? We're from Chicago.
Mike, and I'm trying to think of Mike's last name.
Jim Thompson.
His father was a state legislator and very active in the Illinois Republican Party. I didn't know all this time. I just knew he was interested in politics and a Republican. He was a good guy. So was his dad, I later learned. He wasn't caught up in most of the scandals I read about every day in the Chicago papers. But that's the way it worked. It was who you knew. I don't know if it was still like that when you were there, but it was who you knew and how well you knew them, whether they were willing to do you a favor. And the people in the Squire's book are absolutely like this. Garfinkel and Sheridan, who were, from my point of view, political enemies, friends, but political enemies, they swapped favors all the time. You know, it was the way life existed. It wasn't about what your political beliefs were or your philosophical points of view. It was who you knew and who you could help and what you were willing to do for them.
So any other
Yeah.
questions?
Going back to the secrets in the Hopewell Box, what were the issues in 1945? Why the 300 and the 100?
Well,
It was a special
there was a
election.
G.I. Joe ticket. Sheridan, Garfinkel, and Flippin, and the others, not so much the candidates, they were scared to talk about it, I think, offend other voters. Behind the scenes, you know, all these veterans were coming back from World War II. Let's put a slate together of 5 or 10 folks to run for the state senate, state house, city council, et cetera, who are veterans, which meant they were all basically young and new to elected office. I don't know if that was a specific election involving the Hopewell Box, but I suspect the G.I. Joe ticket won. Therefore, Beverly Briley went into office, Clifford Allen went into office, I think Ben West held some office at the same time.
I think what it's my understanding, reading this yesterday, the 45 election, though, was to fill the office of sheriff. And I
Yes.
think
Yes.
they moved it up to
Garner Robinson.
to have a special election rather than a regular election. So it was the way the votes were counted, where Jim Squire's grandfather and other people knew that the votes didn't come in till really late when they saw how many votes they needed. I think Johnson did this in Texas.
It'd also be a much smaller voter turnout
Yes.
for a special election.
Yes.
Absolutely, we see that all the time.
And she only told you half the crookedness that went on at the Hopewell Box. Half of us all of a sudden had 300 imaginary voters, or at least 200 imaginary voters that cast a ballot. The other half, right there in the first chapter in the book, or at least that's my memory, it's early in the book, you know, some young Politico person's driving the pickup truck from Old Hickory, which are Hopewell Boxes, downtown to the courthouse at 1 o'clock in the morning to deliver the actual paper ballots there in 1945 to be sealed, certified, stamped, whatever, and stops on the bridge across the Cumberland River, right there downtown. Not out in Old Hickory where there might have been 20 people awake at 1 o'clock in the morning, right smack downtown. There was nothing particularly secret about this. It's going to be the same in 1962 with Little Evil Jacobs. It's going to be the same in almost every election we ran in this city for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Stops on the bridge across the Cumberland River and pulls out the boxes of paper ballots that they, whoever was in charge of Hopewell Box, I believe this would have been Garner Robinson, that they didn't like. They'd put all the bad votes in a particular box and pitches them in the Cumberland River. They're gone. Everybody knew it happened. It was an open story that, you know, there were no secrets. Everybody knew Little Evil Jacobs bought votes at every election, not just in 1960. For those of you that didn't live here in 62, Richard Fulton runs against the incumbent Democratic congressman to become the new member of Congress. And according to the vote count on primary election day, I guess in August of 62, loses.
That's Percy Priest.
Yes, I'm sorry, Percy Priest. And what actually happened, of course, is what happened to every election. Little Evil Jacobs, and I'm sure people on the other side, were out there as fast as they could buying votes. How'd you buy votes? Here, go down there and vote in a few minutes, Joe, and I'll give you this bottle of beer or this bottle of liquor or this $10 bill or, oh yeah, I'll go vote. I'll go vote 2 or 3 times. And they'd give him names out of the cemetery to use.
When my dad got involved in politics, he went to the county courthouse in Huntsville to watch the votes be counted, especially any absentee votes. And I never saw, growing up, I had never seen anything like the meanness, the tricks, the lying, the bribery that went on in the Republican Party. I mean, those mountain Republicans, you know, they were on the side of the North. They're tough people. So when I read this, you know, and my dad was eventually defeated, there was a lot of money given out to his opponent. So it's nothing new, and you know.
I was at the one of the meetings at Sigenthal's editorial office at the Tennessean in August when all this is happening about Little Evil Jacobs and Fulton losing the election. And I was a kid, you know, I was sitting in the very back keeping my mouth shut. And I think it was Sig, somebody in charge of the meeting said, look, we may not be able to prove in court Little Evil Jacobs stole this election, but we all know it happened, right? And everybody, mm-hmm. And he's done it before, mm-hmm. And maybe some of our folks have done, but we're not going to talk about that in other elections. What we're going to talk about and focus on is Little Evil Jacobs. We've got photographs of him handing over liquor and cash and this kind of thing. And even if we can't prove it in court, we're going to run a story every day in the Tennessean because the only votes we have to win are the I think it was 5 people on the primary election board, election commission, whatever it's called in those days, who certifies the vote. This isn't a court of law. We just have to put enough pressure on these guys that are on the primary certification board that they'll vote to certify Fulton rather than the guy that actually had the majority of the votes that day. And they did after about 2 months of very intense campaign there. They voted to certify Fulton.
Other questions?
Who was Big Evil? Who was Big Evil?
Boy, I used to know. He had a different name. He wasn't related by blood, I mean. But he had a similar job.
Said Charlie,
Charlie Riley, is that?
Charlie Riley.
Charlie something. I can't remember. It may have been Riley. I tried to stay far away from this. I mean, I was 17. I didn't want to go to jail. I mean, I thought all these people were crooks and going to jail. I didn't understand this is the way it was done. Nobody was going to arrest them. Nobody was going to prosecute them.
Gee, if we ever see anything like that today. Other questions? Larry, talk a little bit about working in the consolidation of Metro and Metro Nashville government when we joined.
Yeah, you know,
the city.
that's one of the great things we all benefit from.
Close to the microphone.
One of the great things we all benefit from living here in Nashville is metropolitan government, the merger of the city and county governments. And I was growing up in the county out in Donaldson. We didn't have sewers. We didn't have a library. We didn't have a lot of the benefits the city did. And the city wanted more taxpayers, more tax revenue. Lots of different politicians from every political background had different reasons they wanted a merger, a consolidation. So in 1958, they put it on the ballot. You had to take a public referendum and get it approved by a majority of both the county and the city. We, the good guys that wanted the consolidation, are going to lose that 1958 referendum. County voted no. We don't want to merge with the city. They got all this debt. They got all these problems, blah, blah, blah. Then in 1962, we, being Sigenthaler and Beverly Briley, who were not close politically, but they had the same common goal here. They both wanted metropolitan government. Got it put back on the ballot in 1962. We went through all the same thing again, and this time it won. What was the difference? Well, in 1962, I can't remember the folks that got to come in and run the campaign. They really knew what they were doing. It was obvious at the meetings. Again, sitting in the back row, watched and observed. They knew what they were doing. They knew how to run a campaign. Personally, I was too young to vote. I didn't get to vote till November. I was too young to vote in this election, but I went to the library every week. I'd hitchhike from Donaldson downtown, walk up to 8th and Union, 7th and 8th and Union, and go in the library and spend half the day. And all of a sudden, I walk in up there, and there's a big sign at the checkout desk. If you live in the county and the Metro consolidation vote fails, you will not be eligible to get a library card and may not use the library. Boy, that did it. I went down and stood at Lebanon Road and McGavick Pike every night for about a week handing out handbills saying, vote yes on Metro. You know, I wanted my library card. The people running this election knew how to do it, and they won, I forget the margin, but it was fairly easy all of a sudden. So, you know, the benefits we get from that consolidation and the political changes it made, that's when it happened.
How was Nashville constituents about it, about consolidation? The city versus the county. I guess they didn't have to worry.
The black politicians were the people holding office, were very concerned that we're getting ready to add all these white voters out there in the county, 95% of them white. And that's going to really hurt our political power. So part of the way our metro government got constructed was Beverly Briley and other folks for it said, okay, what do you need to reassure you? Well, we need specific geographic area council elections. That way we know we'll win all the North Nashville City Council elections. They're 90% black. And a couple of other areas. We want those to be specific, single districts just elected there. And there were some promises made, I know, about jobs at the courthouse.
The banner was
There
against
was
it.
more to, yeah, the banner's against everything. I mean, the Banner's the most racist, conservative newspaper I've ever read in my life growing up. You know, Mr. Stallman personally led the fight to get Reverend Jim Lawson expelled from Vanderbilt Divinity School because he was teaching black students and a few others how to conduct a sit-in to protest civil rights. Mr. Stallman was the owner, publisher, I guess,
Board
of
of
the Banner.
Directors.
Was he the editor as well? Okay.
Owner.
Yeah, I know some of you out here know this from every day. The Tennessean ones shared an office with him, in effect. Right, he was a member of the Board of Trust of Vanderbilt for years and years.
Got the guy kicked out.
He was an officer of the Bellmead Country Club. Stallman was somebody who had a great deal of influence here in our community, whether we liked it or not. And
Vanderbilt did not want to fire Reverend Lawson, but Stallman insisted on it. So he had a lot of influence.
Reverend Lawson always counseled me in later years, last 30 years, every time I'd see him at events. He'd say, now, Larry, you still messing with politics? And I'd laugh and say, well, I try to. He said, and I've told you before, there's nothing good to be gained from politics, ever, under any circumstances. Never could convince him otherwise, and I guess he was right. Nowadays, I know he was right.
Jim Robertson ran the campaign.
For Metro, that's right.
Right.
That's right.
Who
Who was later a state legislator from what, Inglewood, Madison area?
Became Senate leader, yeah.
Right, right.
So
Yes.
were libraries the only reason that county voters changed their mind?
Well, that's the reason I got fired up about it.
I grew up in the county, and I'm trying to think what my parents.
Well, I was getting ready to say, my mother talked about, oh, we'll finally get sewers.
Garbage.
If we consolidate, merge the two government, and it took 15 years, or I forget how long, but yeah, they did. We're going to get part of the Metro Charter. If you read it, is we've got a general services district and an urban services district. Basically, it's city and county, but some differences. And you'll see in there about certain benchmarks have to be met, and then general services will get taxed more because then they'll get sewers and other services and sidewalks, which, of course, still is an ongoing issue today.
Put your glasses
Yeah,
on.
if I could promise all the sidewalks where I could win most elections in this city.
Old city limits, you
Yeah.
go in the west end, area, Whitland, Brighton Road, all that.
Yeah.
The place where there are sidewalks is in the old city limits, and where there are no sidewalks, those streets were out in the county.
Oh, and the other thing, my mother didn't talk about it out loud. She would only talk about this at Christmas once a year. When I'd hitchhike home, half the rides I'd get from downtown out to Donaldson would stop out at the railroad tracks, which was the city limit, Right there before the railroad track was Corn Sweats Liquors. 2/3 of the rides home, I got stopped at Corn Sweats Liquor to buy liquor. No liquor could be sold in the county, only in the city. So one more advantage you were going to get, if you count it as an advantage, is you were going to get liquor stores.
I'm sorry, Squire says about the consolidation, and these are Squire's words, that the banner's assuring people that the consolidation of government is a political trick. Joining them was the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and the John Birch Society, which saw Metro as a plot by desegregationists and foreign communists, whom they found indistinguishable.
See,
And so-
nothing changes.
There's several.
Another big thing, between 1958 and 1962, the unsuccessful and the successful, the city under Ben West annexed,
Right. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
and that subjected those people to city taxes, and what was something else. I think that's also when you can't remember the green sticker.
Yes. Wheel tax. Yes.
The general thought is that convinced a lot of people in the county who had voted no before.
Yeah.
Like what was going on.
I think you've hit on the biggest issue in the election was the annexation by Mayor West in the 2 years leading up to the 1962 election. State legislature said Nashville could annex parts of the county without their permission or consent, start charging them higher taxes instead of not giving them anything. And so a lot of people, as he's pointed out, were really upset about that, couldn't get anything done at the legislature about it, and I guess I'm sure many of them, most of them saw, well, at least if we vote for the consolidation, we'll get a promise of sewers and others like that.
Just a minute. Did you have a question? No? Okay. Sorry.
What got annexed?
I can visualize on a map, I don't know what to call the neighborhoods, over across from the fairgrounds, on the other side of Nolensville Road from the fairgrounds, a whole section through there.
Tusculum, Woodbine,
And,
Tusculum,
Woodbine, I'm not sure.
Flat Rock.
Flat Rock, yes, thank you. Part of it, the part of it that was not already in the city got annexed.
They just did a land grab?
Yeah, they just took a map with a magic marker and drew this 20-block section. All right, we're gonna grab this, and then we're gonna grab some parts up toward Joelton. I can't remember. There are 4 or 5 different areas of the city they focus on, and I don't know why. Well, I know generally how this works. People own land there either wanted to be long-range investment planners, either wanted to be annexed or didn't, and they went down to Ben West and other Jake Sheridan and Elkin Garfinkel's office said, you got to get this done for me. And also going on every election, far more important as far as the politicians were concerned, not the voters, was the sheriff's election. Back to where we started on sheriff's election. Sheriff's office got to hire one heck of a lot of employees, process servers, deputy sheriffs, jail officers, et cetera. So it was a very, very politically lucrative office. You could build a political base. Fate Thomas and
Fate Thomas.
Garner Robinson. Fate Thomas did a better job, more efficient job than anybody else. I love Fate. He was my dear friend. Did some things he shouldn't have, but he was and is, if you're still around, my dear friend. My Fate Thomas story is, I moved back to Nashville 2 years out of law school to run a political campaign. We lost. Casey Jenkins stole all our votes with his anti-modern life marches downtown,
Re-elected
racist
probably.
marches downtown about against integrating the schools. So all of a sudden I'm out of a job, lost the political campaign. Nobody likes to hire losing political managers. So my brother Frank and my sister-in-law Jane and I decided we'll start our own law firm. This was really bright. You know, we were in a little office on 21st Avenue and sat there waiting for the phone to ring. Gee, it didn't ring. So, you know, I got smart about it. and decided, we got to stir up some business here. And I got a job teaching constitutional law at Tennessee State. 54 years later, I'm still teaching it.
It's never dull.
My first class, I look out, this 1971 or 72, I look out there and I got a class of 55 students, college, 54 of whom are young black men and women. And there's one white guy sitting right in the middle of the class there. And I thought, well, this is interesting. And I go down the roll and I call out, Thomas, and he raises his hand. I keep going, didn't mean anything to me. And after class, he comes up to introduce himself. Says, Larry, you don't remember me, do you? Of course I didn't. I didn't have any clue. He said, you and I worked on the Hooker campaign together in '66. I said, are you Fate Thomas? He said, yeah. Fate Thomas, who was running for sheriff, decided he needed a college degree. And he was going to get it at the HBCU Black College in town, and did. Over the next 4 years, he took 3 of my courses, made good, not great, but good grades in all of them, showed up every class, never missed a class, never missed an assignment. I mean, I was stunned. I thought, I'm going to see him first day of class and last day of class, and he's going to have some AI machine, otherwise known as the deputy sheriff, write all the papers for him. No. He did the work, gutted it out. It wasn't easy for him. I don't think Fate had read a textbook since he'd been at high school, kind of thing. Fate, if you wanted to run for after Sheridan,
school.
and then when he graduated, he comes see me right after graduation and says, where did I sign up for grad school? I said, well, Fate, I don't think we have any criminal justice graduate course. We don't have a graduate program. He said, why not? I don't know. That's up to the Board of Regents. I'll get back to you. Week later, the Board of Regents calls my boss and said, you've just been authorized to create a graduate program in criminal justice. We expect the first classes to meet August 1. We had about 10 days notice. And there was Fate with 10 of his deputies. It took 10 people to have a class. With 10 of his deputies showed up for that first class. And one of the requirements of having the job was you're going to go sign up for the graduate program at TSU. For the next 20 years, any of my criminal justice students that graduate at TSU who could get a recommendation was guaranteed a job at the sheriff's office and ran the sheriff's office pretty much for the next 20, 25 years. And that's what I mean when I say the sheriff's job was really important. It's a place you could hire a lot of people. You could do a lot of favors, which is what got Fate in trouble. It wasn't like he was stealing millions of dollars. He was showing up at somebody's home saying, you got a gutter that needs fixing. I got 10 inmates here from the county jail. They're going to fix it for you today. No charge. Just remember to vote for me, kind of thing. I mean, he did that all across the county. Every day at the courthouse, I'm really highly principled and immune to temptation here. I was tempted a lot of times, but I didn't. Every day when I'd go in the courthouse, try lawsuits and whatnot, Fate had a little sheriff's office there at the back door of the Metro Courthouse. And right next to it was a car wash built into the Metro Courthouse. I'd walk by the door every day and Fate said, Larry, roll your car up here. We'll wash your car while you're in court. No, that's all right, Fate. Thanks. That's okay. Thanks anyway. He washed hundreds of cars I say he did. He had inmates who were serving time. Get up here and wash these cars.
Somewhere, someone gave Larry a lot of Fate's papers.
I've got his political papers. We were at Saralee and I used to go to estate sales and buy books every weekend with one of our dear friends sitting out here, and then furniture, and then this, and then that. And this fellow running the estate sale came up to him and said, Larry, I understand you're interested in politics. I said, yeah, I have been. He said, I've got something I want to show you. And I don't even know whose estate sale it was. He comes back with a briefcase full of all these handwritten notes and policy memoranda. I mean, I glanced at them. And I said, what is this? And he said, these are all of Sheriff Thomas's private correspondence for the last 15 years.
Tell Larry after this is over, he needs to edit those and get them.
I've never even read them. They're still at home. I'm going to get there one day. I'll come talk about it when I finally get to them. This I now know who it had to be. I did a little research, figured out this was Fate's number 3 guy in the sheriff's office, who was the custodian of all these record keeping, and he stuffed it all in a briefcase, took it home.
You need to write a book about that.
Yeah, I mean, Larry needs to, the great Alex Haley used to say, every time a person dies, a library burns down. So
I
think
won't
about
burn
that.
it down. It'll be, if I fall over from a heart attack tomorrow, come search.
Good luck
Good
finding
luck.
it, right. But I do want to say that, my dad was on different sides of the issues, sometimes with Sheriff Thomas, who was a friend, but Daddy ended up working later after the unfortunate incarceration of Sheriff Thomas. When Daddy retired from the state, he went to work for Metro because he wanted something to do. And some things happened, and Larry talked to him. Well, they don't need to be doing that with you, blah, blah, blah. And Larry called Fate. Fate Thomas called somebody in the sheriff's office who came up to my dad and said, well, a lot of people, whatever the problem was, went
Was
away.
solved.
Well,
This
I
is
was
after
just-
Fate had served 4 years
I
in
was
federal
like-
prison.
So anyway,
He
was
still
laughing.
had enough influence at the sheriff's office, could solve problems down there.
Other questions, comments? The back.
So did annexation of parts of Nashville take place before the Metro vote that
Ben
was
Wiz.
successful?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I was.
Somebody knows the
I know
answer.
the annexation took place. I don't know if there
Somebody-
was any practical effect of it.
Someone in the audience knows. Who said yes?
Well, I know it took place before the 62 election.
Right.
I don't know what.
They announced it.
I don't know.
There were maps in the newspaper about it, and they announced it had happened. I'm not sure there were any practical. I don't know if there were any practical effects or not.
So 1962 was when the Metro government was established?
Metro government was established when, in
62?
October of '62, maybe.
63, maybe voted.
Okay, yeah, maybe it was a year. I don't know when the date was that the consolidation took effect. 62 or 63, one of the other.
62. Yep.
Okay, 62, she says. She would know.
But I'm not sure when if it went into effect, 63. It's in the book and I
But
read
these
it
politicians
yesterday.
cared a lot more about who won the sheriff's office than they did who won the mayor's office or the presidency or the governor's. It had a lot more immediate effect on daily life in Nashville. And again, Fate Thomas is the best example of it. He was the best elected politician in Nashville during the years he was in office. By best, I mean best at winning elections. And that was his job from his point of view. I had a dear friend that wanted to run for countywide office. I said, okay, I'll help you. And I called up Richard Fulton, who at that moment was a member of Congress, and said, can I get a copy of all your voter lists that you're using in your last election? Oh, yeah, okay, come down here, we'll give it to you. And I went down and got it, and it was 4 years old, which meant it was near worthless. I mean, it was just out of date. And I couldn't very well complain to him. It wasn't like I was paying for it. He was doing me a favor. So, sorry. So I called the mayor, whoever it was at that point. His list was even older. So I finally got smart, and I called Fate, and I said, Fate, I need a current voters list, that works, et cetera, et cetera. He gave me a list that was a month old. I mean, he was light years ahead of all the others, and you had to know Fate. If you met Fate and didn't know him or his background or anything about him, you would think, what would you think? A lot of you knew Fate. I mean, he talked like a madman, literally. Talked 108 miles an hour and kind of stuttered the whole time. You could just go down. That's not even a good imitation of what it was like to have a conversation with Fate. Fate needed all the help he could get in elections.
What year did he come into office? And was it Leslie Jett before him?
Yes, Leslie Jett before. And Jett couldn't run, is my memory. I don't know whether there was a maximum term. I think there was a maximum number of terms, and fate went to the legislature, got that changed. And then when Lamar Alexander started beating the Democrats to be governor, fate got his number 2 guy put in up in Lamar's office. Again, it wasn't like these folks were Democrats versus Republicans. It was, I want influence, I want to know everybody, not necessarily to do anything bad, but I want to be able to help my friends and help new friends and do my job. That's what most of them thought.
So I think we have time for one more question, so we'll get you all out of here, or one more comment. Gentleman in the back.
Just, this is very basic for, I'm new, basically, and I don't know. What is the difference between the sheriff's office and the Nashville Police Department? Have these rules changed since fate, and how do they stand today?
Great question. I don't know how the change came about, but yes, the difference is the sheriff's office has no law enforcement power. That's all the police department. What the sheriff's office does is run the county jail and maintain order in the courthouse, in the courts. Serve process.
Police officer. We could control the sheriff's office ran the jail, served the civil warrants, we served the criminal warrants.
Right.
that ran the
I'm
county.
sorry, that's exactly right.
That's basically what you need to know.
And my memory is, I'm sorry, Sam.
Constitution.
Right. They can't abolish the sheriff's office because it's constitutional required by the state constitution. My memory is that division where they removed law enforcement power came when we did metro consolidation. My memory is that's one of the backroom deals that was made now. Who it was that wanted that division made and why,
It was Briley building power.
I don't know.
It was, because
Okay.
there's a great story about Michael's grandfather in there, and the sheriff and the police.
Yeah, here's who can tell us is the grandson of Jake Sheridan over here. Where's the briefcase from Jake Sheridan's office, Michael?
Michael's a,
It might be in there with Fate Thomas somewhere.
thank you all so very much. We'll be around afterwards. It's an honor to be here.